Hello and welcome to World Now. Let's begin with the developments in China, where the country has commenced its largest ever military exercise around Taiwan after Nancy Pelosi's controversial visit to the island in the face of warnings from Beijing. Taiwan called the military drills around the island illegitimate and irresponsible. Taiwan's defense ministry disclosed that China launched two Dongfeng ballistic missiles into waters at around 2 p.m. local time, saying the move that stopped ships and planes from using the space violates its sovereignty and amounts to a blockade. China sees self-ruled Taiwan as a breakaway province that will eventually be under its control. This comes at a time when US-China tensions have been growing. Let's talk this through by speaking with a global affairs analyst, Kunle Fallo, who is joining me via Zoom to discuss this latest development. Thank you so much for joining us in World Now. Now, U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's arrival in Taiwan on Tuesday made her the highest-ranking official to visit the democratic island in a quarter century. But this has sparked a furious reaction from Beijing. Why is China furious over Pelosi's trip to Taiwan?
Yes, definitely. It calls for concern in China because Taiwan is a self-ruled democratic country that has 23 million people in it. It's a little island that the Chinese government believes it's rightfully theirs. And when you have the third-ranking member of the U.S. Political officer coming over to Taiwan, it smells a cause for concern for China because for quite a number of reasons. If the United States is coming in to offer its unflinching support to Taiwan, it means that China is not being recognized as the original owner of that little island. And there have been talks and there have been insinuations from the Chinese party that they own, Taiwan, and they're working tirelessly to reunify Taiwan with mainland China. Now, having said that, there are other reasons why it's really becoming a serious escalation and problem for China, because they feel like they exclusively own the little country and they're doing everything they can. And then again, it kind of delegitimizes their power in the region because Taiwan is gradually becoming a force to reckon with in that region, and that will leave China to be scuttling and not to be competitive in that region, particularly when it comes to technology and other items that has been exported from China. So economically and politically, it's very important that China takes a hold of Taiwan. But this is not going well for the United States because they're looking to support and they're showing support for Taiwan with the promises, and particularly with the recent visit from Nancy Pelosi.
Right. So apples understand what they think this means when multiple organs of the Communist Party, including the Foreign Ministry, the Defense Ministry, want that a visit, that's Pelosi's visit, push Taiwan into the abyss of disaster and bring deep misfortune to its people. What do you think they mean by that statement?
Well, to be honest with you, the rhetoric is just coming from a political point of view, just to ratchet up tension. But it's more talk and less action. Why am I saying this? Let's go back to 1996 when the then president Lee was running for re-election. He had went back to visit the United States, and that didn't go down well with the incumbent president in China at that time, and they fired missiles. And this is not the first time this is happening. It has happened between 1995 and 1996, like I rightly mentioned. So they could have done more to deter Nancy Pelosi from coming. They couldn't do it, but there are more political rhetoric from China that's seeming that is spelling doom for Taiwan. But be that as it may, it shows that the United States is not flinching in its support for Taiwan, and there's really little to what China can do for right now. I guarantee that there are multiple negotiations on underneath meetings going on right now. It will continue because we haven't seen the end of this matter.
Yeah, well, very quickly, I'm not sure whether you noticed it, because elsewhere on the island, some groups of protesters stormed on American flags and held up signs urging or disparaging Pelosi and urging the U.S. delegation to go home. One held up a sign calling Pelosi an American witch. So does it mean that some Taiwanese actually support unification with China?
It just goes across board. There are different divides and different beliefs in different parts of the country. Let's use Russia and Ukraine as an example. In some parts of Ukraine, you have people that favors Russia coming in to take over the country. Yeah. And that's exactly what's happening in Taiwan. There are some parts of the Taiwanese people that truly believes that China is the legitimate owner of, legitimate country that's supposed to take over Taiwan. Yeah. And don't forget, there's only 23 million people in a small island. They're still reliant on them for importation of sand from China, and they also in return send foods and all kinds of stuff. And so China being a dominant country in that region, they still have some form of reliance on them. But be that as it may, that's not to say the entire population of Taiwanese people are in full support of China taking over Taiwan, regardless of the small, the small protests here and there.
Well, global affairs analyst Kunle Falowo, thank you so much for your insight. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot.
The Prime Minister of Cambodia, Hun Sen, has met visiting Chinese State Councillor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi, restating his country's firm support for China in maintaining its core interests. The Prime Minister stressed that Cambodia firmly adheres to the One China policy, wishing the 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China a complete success. Prime Minister Hun Sen stated that the ironclad bilateral friendship has taken root in both nations, enjoying fruitful results from the joint construction of the Belt and Road, which brought huge benefits to their people. And Qatar's Foreign Minister Mohammed Al-Thani has held talks with the United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Cambodia. During the meeting, the two sides exchanged their views on the latest developments on Iran's nuclear deal and the situation in Afghanistan. Consultation between representatives of Iran and other parties will be held in Vienna later in the day.
Friend, former Mr. Qatar, we spent a lot of time together in various parts of the world and on the phone, and I think this is evidence of the very close partnership between Qatar and the United States on a broad range of both regional and global issues. We had an opportunity to just spend some time talking about a number of them, to include Afghanistan, to include Iran, to include some other regional issues, and of course to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing here in Cambodia. But this is a partnership, a relationship that the United States values tremendously.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, for receiving me here today. I know you have a very busy and packed schedule, but I think the world events requires consultation between both of us, especially with what's going on in our region. I think our discussion today is very important for the security of our region, and we really appreciate the relationship and the partnership and the commitment that the U.S. has toward our region. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's bring you an update on the ongoing war in Ukraine. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has addressed the Workers' Youth League on the Norwegian island of Utøya, underscoring the importance of continued support for Ukraine. The NATO chief says Norwegians must not forget that the war in Ukraine also concerns them. He went against President Vladimir Putin and said that all must be done to prevent a major war. The NATO Secretary General was a former Prime Minister in Norway when Anders Breivik attacked Utøya and the government quarters in 2011. Still staying with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has stated that the UN Secretariat does not take money from the oil and gas industry. He spoke at the launch of the third report of his Global Crisis Response Group on food, energy and finance over the Ukraine conflict. The UN chief called for taxation on windfall profits of oil and gas companies from the current energy crisis. Mr. Guterres also has called for oil and gas companies to face special taxes. His comments come as surging energy prices sparked by the war in Ukraine push industry profits to new highs. Now, Peru's Prime Minister ANIBAL Torres has resigned. This makes him the fourth to step down in a year under President Pedro Castillo. In a letter sent to President Castillo, Mr. Torres said he was stepping down for personal reasons. His resignation will trigger an automatic cabinet reshuffle. The 79-year-old first served as President Castillo's Justice Minister and then took over the prime ministerial portfolio in February after 3 previous prime ministers had come and gone. President Castillo has survived 2 impeachment votes in 12 months and is the target of 5 criminal investigations. Now let's take you to the United States, where Democrats displayed a newfound sense of optimism about the Kansas abortion rights after voters backed a measure protecting abortion rights. At the White House, President Joe Biden hailed the vote, saying it's a direct result of outrage at the Supreme Court's decision in June to repeal a woman's constitutional right to obtain an abortion. There is more in this report.
We do not want the government making our health care decisions for us in Kansas.
As a close run-in ended in victory for the supporters with the Kansans for constitutional freedom, the message is clear.
We are thrilled and relieved, and at the end of the day, we trusted Kansans to make their own decisions about medical care, and it turns out all of Kansas does too.
Cheering, hugs, tears of joy filled the room as supporters of the Vote No Watch party reacted to the abortion ballot measure failing 60-40. Doors opened at around 6, and by 10:30 the room was full. Among supporters were Representative Sharice Davids, Senator Denise Kise, and Planned Parenthood President and CEO Emily Wales. And now, Vote No supporters are focused on the next steps.
The next steps really is making sure that women continue to have access to health care in Kansas and that we protect the constitutional rights and freedom of women here to make decisions about their bodies. Lawmakers will come back in January and try different things, and so we will be there to make our voices heard and make sure that the rights of women are protected.
Meanwhile, in a swift reaction, the White House says last night's vote was mostly personal decisions.
Americans in Kansas turned out to challenge views that would move the country backwards, with fewer rights and politicians invading our most personal decisions, and they won. In the wake of Dobbs, the president predicted people would turn out in record numbers to reclaim rights stolen from them, and they did. This is a big deal for women who can't afford to have abortion. This is a big deal for women who are trying to figure out how are they going to pay for their health care.
Last night, in the American heartland, the people of Kansas sent an unmistakable message to MAGA Republican extremists: back off women's fundamental rights. In the first vote on abortion rights since the MAGA Supreme Court's reprehensible decision to take away constitutional rights protected by Roe v. Wade, and which was cheered by many Republicans here in the Senate, voters in Kansas decided by a double-digit margin to preserve the freedom of choice in their state constitution.
With the nation's eye on Kansas, the state now sets an example for elections to follow.
Now, away from the United States, a 62-year-old French man survived for 16 hours at sea by using an air bubble inside his boat after it capsized. The 12-meter vessel, which had set sail from Portugal's capital, Lisbon, sent out a distress signal late from the Atlantic Ocean. Spanish Coast Guards found the upturned boat, but the sea was too rough to rescue him, so the sailor had to wait until morning. Coast Guard divers say the man's survival was verging on the impossible. A rescue ship carrying 5 divers as well as 3 helicopters set off to find and rescue the man who has not yet been named. Now, a suspected arson wildfire in Berlin, northwest Spain, has spread over 550 hectares and resulted to the temporary closure of several major roads. The regional government of Galicia said that the fire started simultaneously at 3 different sites, pointing to clear intentionality to cause damage to people and property. We have more in this report.
Firefighters were on the ground working to halt the spread of the blaze, as seen in this footage of ecological transition. A helicopter was also deployed as temperatures up to 40 degrees Celsius and wind changes made efforts more difficult. The General Directorate of Traffic reported that major roads in the region were cut off for several hours due to the fire. The Minister of Rural Affairs, Jose Gonzalez, has called the fires in Spain's Galicia an act of arson. Mr. Gonzalez visited the affected municipality on Wednesday, the 3rd of August, and appealed for the collaboration of residents to stop the heartless people. According to Spanish media reports, the forest fire in Verín had up to 10 outbreaks recorded in the early evening on the 3rd of August, all located in different parts of town, which forced a significant number of air and land resources to be deployed. The fire forced the level 2 to be decreed due to its proximity to a neighborhood. The mayor of the Galician town confirmed that the extent of the fire had forced the evacuation of several homes in the area. According to local media reports, all fires recently recorded made a total of 720 hectares that have been affected so far in Galicia.
While a volcano has erupted on a mountain near Iceland's capital, Reykjavik, after days of rising earthquake activity in the area. Images and live streams by local news outlets showed lava and smoke spewing from a fissure in the ground on the side of the Fagradalsfjall mountain, which last year saw an eruption that lasted 6 months. The Department of Civil Protection and Emergency Management announced that tourists and residents should avoid the area due to poisonous gases, although there was no immediate risk of damage to critical infrastructure. While Texans are still reeling from the May shooting in Uvalde that claimed the lives of 21 persons, the state faces another reminder this week of the proliferation of gun violence in Texas. Wednesday marks 3 years after the El Paso Walmart massacre, where a gunman killed 23 persons in what authorities allege was a racially motivated attack. The accused shooter is believed to have driven hundreds of miles from North Texas with a semi-automatic weapon to ward off what he called an invasion of the state by Hispanics. He is currently facing federal charges of hate crimes, resulting in dozens deaths and dozens of state charges. In the shooting's aftermath, gun reform advocates, democratic lawmakers, and people from across the state clamored for a change to Texas gun laws. Less than 3 years later, the Uvalde shooting, which claimed the lives of 19 children and 2 school teachers, created a similar outcry. In Lagos, the state government says it's committed to moving towards alternative sources of transport as part of its contribution in reducing carbon emissions, which increase climate change concerns. Esther Mokpariola reports on this.
Lagos state government, in synergy with the private sector, plans to mainstream climate action in the next phase of its developmental agenda. This is in line with the state's efforts in combating climate change crisis.
Quality of life, our health.
Stakeholders in the energy and transport sector at the Lagos Climate Change Summit proffered sustainable solutions in promoting a green economy, even as the state is pursuing financial mechanisms to support economic growth.
Decarbonizing mobility. The first thing we need to do in that regard is expand our mass transit system, where everybody does not feel the need to put their vehicles on the road. 7,000 trucks move from Lagos. About 70% of those trucks
are not Lagos bound. They're heading out of Lagos, but they start their journey in Lagos and they contribute to our greenhouse gas emissions in Lagos. So what we're doing is creating policies, because that's what government does, to encourage the production of clean energy.
So there's no point converting to electric where you don't have the infrastructure to actually power your electric buses or to maintain the electric buses. So part of the agreement is to look at the infrastructure that is required to ensure that we have a sustainable electric bus system.
Other areas of concern at the summit include improving health indices through investment in air quality management.
We're talking to manufacturers, we're talking to textile industries, and we're encouraging recycling and reusing and proper disposal of waste. When we don't manage waste properly, it leads to air pollution.
In the meantime, experts say the best way the state and the country can deal with this climate crisis is building a capacity to be able to solve its own localized problem, which will in turn contribute towards the global fight against climate change. Esther Mokwariola, TVC News, Lagos.